when we think about how do you keep a group of people together when we're always at disparate locations, like we are from the Dominican Republic through basically 5 affiliates and then into Pittsburgh, we're hardly ever in the same place at the same time, which means that like vision and identity have to be the kind of connective tissue of the group. And so when we taking a step back and listening to Corey and Steph talk about this player, one of the things that we kind of put into place a few years ago inside of the organization is that everybody is a baseball coach. And so what does that mean, everybody's a baseball coach? We have reached a consensus on what the development focus is for each of these 165 players in the minor leagues and 40 players on the 40-man roster. We have a very specific development focus. And then what the individualized groups and disciplines are tasked with doing is saying, bringing your expertise to the table, how can you contribute to us reaching this focus? So in this particular case, when we understand that the running load is increasing, there's going to be physiological costs. When we understand that the position is switching, there's going to be psychological costs to having to deal with those new things. And so I think it's really important to go back and talk about the two things that we saw from Steph and Corey. One was that without the relationship that Corey had with the player, you probably don't get to a willingness and a buy-in to make the adjustments that he needs. And then without the expertise and the collaboration and the communication, you don't source out what those needs actually are and then have them be actionable, because we can collect all the information in the world, but if we don't use any of it, or we can do all the assessments in the world, but if we're not using that assessment, what is the actual value to us? It just becomes a drain on our time, and that's incredibly expensive, again, when you're in such when you're in disparate locations everywhere. So I think the thing that connects all of us is answering those questions. Like, how does your expertise and your discipline affect what we're trying to accomplish with this particular person? Do we have the relationship to get that done? The thing that we want to do, is it something that we can actually measure? And it's okay if you can't necessarily measure it perfectly. And then all driving towards that final point, which is this showing up on the field? Is this showing up in the player's performance on the field? Is he taking better routes in the outfield? Is he running faster? Is his first step quicker? Is his acceleration getting better? And I think one of the things, and probably why we're sitting on this stage now, is that kind of using these platforms now to consolidate all that information so that we can actually have these conversations in as objective of a way as possible. The responsibility I've always felt as a leader of groups of people is really pretty simple. It's not easy to do, but it's pretty simple, and that you have to provide clarity and resources, and then you have to get out of the way. But then you also have to be willing to defer all credit and accept all blame. And so if you show the people that you're working with that you're willing to do that, then I think you get a lot more actionable insight and results out of the group. And then you have to do the same thing up. You have to show them that you're willing to accept responsibility if something doesn't go right, and it's me on the line, and not, like in this case, it's not Steph or Corey. Like, I'm going to accept responsibility if something goes off the rails. And when the organization that you're working in understands that, then I think you have that environment now where you can collect information, and executive leadership is okay with just seeing some of it. And we're very fortunate. Again, we're very fortunate to have a general manager who, when I presented this idea to him, said, I don't need to see anything. I trust that you guys are going to get this figured out, and that's why we're putting you in these positions. I don't need to see anything. We still give him a little something.
I think that is the most important part about having a platform, is then making sure that it can be shared across the organization. So as people want to do their own research and look into things, then they can start pulling data that maybe you weren't thinking of. Every new hire that we make that is a kid, like a newer kid that's coming out of school, has probably been somewhere, met somebody, worked under somebody different that has a different perspective. And I think by allowing those people to look into things and really just judge what is going on from day one. Now, yeah, there's probably some learning there first. You got to make sure you get them onboarded and up to speed. But making sure that they can see all the data and work through that independently, for me, is probably the most important part of the platform.
To ensure that we have appropriate tracking of that on our end from a nutrition standpoint. The AMS platform with Teamworks has been a huge help when it comes to that for us, to be able to have our documentation, as well as then in a department that has had turnover. And so while you always aim for consistency in your practitioners and what they're providing and continuity in that, there is differences, right, just in the provider. So that AMS system will also help with that, because while, yes, we as dietitians might have turnover, our players are also advancing between levels. And so being able to have that information that's accessible to everyone, as we've mentioned, has been huge. And then on that same point, to be able to incorporate the aspect of Teamworks Nutrition's platform in from an energy expenditure, an individualized meal plan focus, and then also the food service aspect of it has been vital. And it's actually, brought a lot of really great changes, both to the platform itself from the input that from its starting days as Note Meal, now to Teamworks Nutrition. Like we said, it's breaking the silos down, finding ways to intervene, and then recognizing, nutrition's occasional cool tech might be a nice blender, but hopefully it's a little bit more than that as you're leaning into what a practitioner can provide and do and intervene and implement as well with a player.